Hi, welcome to Accessibility with Meg. This is Meg, and today we are continuing to read Accessibility Principles, a part of Accessibility Fundamentals. This is part 2, and we read part 1 yesterday. Continuing to read. Users can use different input modalities beyond the keyboard. Input modalities beyond the keyboard, such as touch activation, voice recognition, speech input, and gestures can make content easier to use for many people. Yet, not everyone can use each of these input modalities and to the same degree. Particular design considerations maximize the benefit of these input modalities. This includes gestures that require dexterity or fine movement have alternatives that do not require high dexterity. Components are designed to avoid accidental activation, for example, by providing undo functionality. Labels presented to users match corresponding object names in the code to support activation by voice. Functionality that is activated by movement can also be activated through user interface components. Buttons, links, and other active components are large enough to make them easier to activate by touch. Meeting this requirement makes the content easier to use for many people with a wide range of abilities using a wide range of devices. This includes content used on mobile phones, tablet computers, and self-serve terminals such as ticketing machines. So all that this is saying is that input modalities that are beyond the keyboard, things like touch activation, voice recognition, and on mobile phones, gestures that we would use, all of these have to have alternatives for people who cannot use those modalities or have limited limitations to how they can use these modalities, right? For example, gestures require movement of your fingers and your hands on your phones, right? So there is fine movement, but there needs to be an alternative so that it does not require high dexterity. For example, there should be maybe a one-click button doing the same function as when you move or when you use a gesture to do something. So that's important. Another example they talk about here is accidental activation of something on a website, for example. So those components, sometimes we have people who use the internet. Maybe they have shaky hands, if they have Parkinson's disease, for example. There should not be this, they should not, if they accidentally click on something or activate something on the screen, they should be able to undo that activation or that functionality, or pause it or stop it and be able to roll back so that they can click that correctly and not by accident, right? So that ability needs to be provided. Things like having labels within all of your elements inside of your code is very important, and all your fields should have proper labels so that they can be identified and announced correctly by screen readers, right? That's important again. So things like buttons, links, and other components, they need to have a proper target area, or what we call large enough size to make them easier to activate by touch. So the area around it which activates that button should be large enough. I think it's 24 by 24 and 44 by 44 pixels in the later versions. So you need to have enough room around your buttons and your links and other other components so that they can be clicked correctly. Um, just things like this need to be kept in mind. Also, when you use mobile phones, tablets, and self-serve terminals like ticketing machines, etc., we should have clear alternative methods or make it as accessible as possible. Okay, right. Continuing to read. Understandable information and user interface. Text is readable and understandable. Content authors need to ensure that text content is readable and understandable to the broadest audience possible, including when it is read aloud by text to speech. Such content includes identifying the primary language of a web page, such as Arabic, Dutch, or Korean, identifying the language of text passages, phrases, and other parts of the web page, providing definitions for any unusual words, phrases, idioms, and abbreviations, using the clearest and simplest language possible, and providing simplified versions. Pausing to read. So this content here just explains that all the content that you have, or whatever text content you are displaying, it has to be readable and understandable to the broadest audience possible, for which you have to make sure that your primary language information is in place. So your lang attribute or your metadata is correct. Also, the language for parts is present, which means that text passages, any phrases, any parts of the web page which uses an other language, that needs to be communicated to the browser so that it is parsed and understood correctly. Right? So you have to use your lang attribute within these sections as well. Also things like, unusual words should be avoided. Very difficult language should be avoided. Like phrases should be simpler, smaller sentences. Idioms and anything that requires a lot of cognitive understanding should be avoided. Abbreviations should be expanded fully upon the first instance of meeting it. And language should be simple, clear, and it should or it should provide simplified versions of information. So reading further. Meeting this requirement helps software, including assistive technology, to process text content correctly. For instance, this requirement helps software to read the content aloud, to generate page summaries, and to provide definitions for unusual words such as technical jargon. It also helps people who have difficulty understanding more complex sentences, phrases, and vocabulary. In particular, it helps people with different types of cognitive disabilities. Okay. And then you have the accessibility requirements related to readability. So I would suggest going in here and reading each of these if you can. There is a section for WCAG and a part for ATAG as well. And then there are stories related to readability that are personas for these situations. And so, that's what we have here. Reading further, content appears and operates in predictable ways. Now, this is very important. It's required for easy reading. Many people rely on predictable user interfaces and are disoriented or distracted by inconsistent appearance or behavior. Examples of making content more predictable include navigation mechanisms that are repeated on multiple pages appear in the same place each time. User interface components that are repeated on web pages have the same labels each time. Significant changes on the web page that do not happen without the consent of the user. So, pausing to read. So what this is saying is that there has to be a predictable way in which things happen on the page. so that there is lesser room for guessing or any confusion that might arise from not having it as such. So navigation mechanisms that we have, all your navigation systems, they will be repeated on every page, right? So they have to come up in the same location, have the same look and feel, and very clearly specify what that navigation is. So if there's a main navigation, it should say main navigation. If you have sub navigations, it should say sub navigation. You have a site map, it has to say site map, right? So your navigation systems have to be very clear. That's one example. User interface components, like if you have repeated components on the pages, they must have the same labels every time. So if you have, for example, you have sitemap on the main page in the footer, it's called sitemap there, but in the next page you call it something else. It makes no sense. So all of the components that are on the page, they must have the same labels if they are being repeated on multiple pages, right? That's important. Also things like if there is an update or some dynamic content is changing, there is an update on the web page. Some things, that might take the user out away from the page, or might even something like some file is going to get deleted. It must happen only with the consent and with the knowledge of the user. So the user should know, okay, fine, I'm going to be deleting this page. So generally, when you try to delete a page or a document or something, it asks you again, are you sure you want to delete this document, right? So that has to happen so that users get to know that this is happening there. So for example, if you cannot see the page and you've clicked by mistake on a delete option, and it doesn't tell you anything, it just deletes the page, then you're at a loss. You don't even know sometimes that has happened, right? So it needs to be communicated very clearly. That's what that's saying. Reading further, meeting this requirement helps people to quickly learn the functionality and navigation mechanisms provided on a website and to operate them according to their specific needs and preferences. For instance, some people assign personalized shortcut keys to functions they frequently use to enhance keyboard navigation. Others memorize the steps to reach certain pages or to complete processes on a website. Both rely on predictable and consistent functionality. Okay, so again, we have accessibility requirements and we have stories related to predictability. Yeah, so it just gives you the guidelines. We are going to be going through all of these later through this readings, so I'm not going to go into it right now. All right, then moving on further and reading. Users are helped to avoid and correct mistakes. Now, forms and other interaction can be confusing or difficult to use for many people, and as a result, they may be more likely to make mistakes. Examples of helping users to avoid and correct mistakes include descriptive instructions, error messages, and suggestions for correction, context-sensitive help for more complex functionality and interaction, opportunity to review, correct, and reverse submissions if necessary. Pausing to read. So here we are talking about forms, and we are talking about giving contextual help, giving very clear instructions, and if in case of an error, providing clear error message to correct that error, to bring awareness to the error, and to be able to help with corrective measures, right? So it needs to have clarity when it comes to error messages, instructions, or any suggestions that we might have to provide, right? Also, context-sensitive help, like I said, for very complex functionality and interactions is a must. Also, as we review, correct, and reverse submissions, the opportunity to do that has to be provided. So if you've made some kind of a submission and you realize that, oh, that's not what had to happen, there should be a way to roll back. Reading further, meeting this requirement helps people who do not see or hear the content and may not recognize implicit relationship sequences and other cues. It also helps people who do not understand the functionality, are disoriented or confused, forget or make mistakes using forms and interaction for any other reason. Okay, that's clear, right? Moving further, we have now reached another section, which is robust content and reliable interpretation, under which content is compatible with current and future user tools. Okay. So robust content is compatible with different browsers, assistive technologies, and other user agents. Examples of how this can be achieved include ensuring markup can be reliably interpreted, for instance, by ensuring it is valid, providing a name, role, and value for non-standard user interface components. Meeting this requirement helps maximize compatibility with current and future user agents, including assistive technologies. In particular, it enables assistive technologies to process the content reliably and to prevent or operate it in different ways. This includes non-standard scripted buttons, input fields, and other controls. Yeah. So, stopping to read, here we see that robust content. It must be made compatible with the different technology that uses it. And the simplest way to have this done is to ensure that your markup is semantic, it can be reliably interpreted, and also providing a name, role, value, and labels for non-standard user interface components. Okay, so we've come to the end of this document, which is the accessibility principles document. We will go back to the accessibility fundamentals document and continue reading from there in the next video. Thank you so much, and if you like the content, please like, subscribe, and share. Subscribing will really help me. Please do subscribe for me. And thank you so much. I'll see you again in another video. Bye.